The world is saying, I don't think that you guys are managing the debt, which they're not. Obviously, we have $37 trillion right here in the U.S. All these other countries are overspending as well. And the debt market, which is way bigger than the stock and equity market, is telling you, no mas. There's going to be a day of reckoning. And when that happens, it's not going to be pretty for the equity markets either.
Welcome to Retire Smart with David Brooks. I'm Chip Maxwell. Well, David, that home opener for the Huskers, that was like old times. You've been a season ticket holder for several years. I don't know if you've seen one quite like that before. 68-0.
I had to look up the last time they'd put up 68 points, and you got to go all the way back to 2012.
Yeah.
And the last time they pitched a shutout, you got to go all the way back to 2009.
Yeah.
Which that actually surprised me that the Huskers have not put up a shutout with the black shirts, even during some rough years, because, let's face it, there's a few weaker opponents that get on the schedule. But, man, what a complete game start to finish. That was a lot of fun. And, of course, it was all the more special seeing our brand name in the stadium.
I'll tell you what, on that, and we've got a picture on the screen now, that really pops. On that electronic ribbon that runs the length of the facade of the East Stadium, are you ready to retire the smart way in our logo? I love seeing that, I admit.
Well, of course, actually, the night before, our logo was displayed over in the volleyball arena because we were sponsoring the girls' volleyball, and we'll be sponsoring men's basketball. So a great partnership with Husker Athletics is officially started now, so it was really cool to see. And what was really special for me, my son Noah is not that big into sports. He's 24. First football game.
Noah's in that picture there. He's on the left.
So my son Noah actually works for us here, does research for this show, but he's not that much into sports. Like, I was football, wrestling. That was, my kids, they played other sports. My older one played a little bit. Noah didn't really care too much for sports, played a little soccer, but he had a great time. So, and I had my nephew up, who's a general contractor out of Orlando, his first Husker game. So we had a really, really great day Saturday. It was a lot of fun.
You noticed what a lot of other folks noticed in the wake of that game. Matt Rule's halftime speech to the team went viral. It was only about 2.5 or 3 minutes, but you are a student of leadership. Well, you have to be a leader to build a business, and that one caught your attention. Why?
Well, it did, because that's the missing element. What we have not had here since I've lived in Nebraska, which is 8 years now, we've not had. I hate to say the word killer instinct, but to finish the job, right? When it comes to competitive sports, when you get ahead, you got to learn to kind of press down and get your opponent. Otherwise, that's how we've lost all those one-score games. Of course, we set that crazy record just 2 seasons ago, and one-loss scores, right? Yeah. You've got to be able to finish the game, and even if when you're get ahead comfortably, what you have to do, especially early in the season at this level of football, you've got to get second, third, and fourth stringers on the field to find out their capabilities. And so sometimes if you do that incorrectly or don't play with the right intensity, you end up giving up those weak scores. And we got 105. I don't know if you know this. 105 different players saw action Saturday, so they got to get some film of actual game film of a lot of young men on that roster. That was fantastic. Special teams did well, right? Offense, defense, everybody played fantastic.
Well, Augie Garrido, who's known around these parts because he was a legendary college baseball coach. He was a regular at the College World Series. And he had some great teams, and often some of their games were lopsided, but one of his mantras was about how you play the game, you play to the standard. It doesn't matter who the opponent is or what the score is.
What is your job in your role on the field, right? Baseball is to hit the ball, right? No matter how many you're ahead.
You got to execute the fundamentals. You got to make plays no matter what's happening. And by the way, when you train yourself to do that, when you are in a tight spot, you can produce, you can deliver, because you got the same standard all the time. It's not like you're trying to find something new in yourself when the pressure's really on. All of these things were standard operating procedure in the Osborne years, and it looks like we're finally bringing them back. Thank goodness.
Well, one of the young men that came to our client night on Memorial Field here about 2 months ago, Luke Lindenmeyer, actually had another viral go because he proposed to his girlfriend, who happens to be one of the Scarlet Dancers, and she said yes on the field. So that was kind of a cool excitement. We actually caught that, so we were right there above that when that happened. That was pretty cool. But anyway, it was a great week all around, and a great leadership on display.
All right, into the news we go, David, and we're going to have to talk about labor and jobs. And we've got some rough sledding, some rough sailing here. First headline is from Fox Business. U.S. job growth missed expectations in August amid economic uncertainty. Private sector, David, 75,000 jobs projected, but only 38,000 actually produced, about half. I don't know, maybe is the silver lining that this guarantees that the Fed will reduce interest rates coming up?
Oh yeah, 100%. It guarantees it. In fact, if those of you watching on YouTube, we have a graph. You can see it's like you're skiing down a hill, right?
Yeah.
The monthly job numbers. Now, just as we got on the air, walked in this studio just this morning. We're recording this on Wednesday morning, Tuesday morning. Sorry, because I'm on a plane here shortly. I got to go to a conference this afternoon.
Yeah.
We had downward revisions through March of last year. You remember a year ago we talked about this downward revisions were 800,000. We're like, what?
Right.
911,000 jobs that they claimed happened in 24 did not happen.
Yeah.
So, and again, the economy's on way shakier ground than people want to believe. And so now the Fed is going to put jobs way ahead of inflation. So you're going to see inflation take over 3%. It's not going to stop the Fed. In fact, you may see the Fed cut 50 basis points after this number this morning. You heard it here first, so we'll see.
Let's get into a couple of charts that you sent the team. One is about job openings versus unemployed job seekers. And just a few years ago, there were too many openings. Employers were begging. It looks like that has flipped.
Yeah, so it's really a very different world. And, after the COVID world, the employee had the upper hand, so to speak, in the negotiating table because there were so many people not willing to go back to work, not willing to leave their homes, and companies that were starting to, expand or grow during those post years were having to take, our interview process was typically 3 to 5 interviews long, depending on the job or role you were applying for here at our firm. We had to cut that down to 2 interviews because the candidate was already accepting another role somewhere, and that was the same across the board for America. Well, now it's flipped back in the employer's, benefit, if you will, where negotiations will be a little tougher because we actually have, this big shift, which does not happen very often.
And then when it comes to the unemployed, you sent a chart showing that the average length of unemployment is getting longer now, 24 and a half weeks. And then I guess it's no surprise it also causes a corresponding retail sales drop. If people aren't working and don't have income, they can't go out and be consumers.
Well, and what's interesting here, too, is I will tell you in the last year, American-born workers have actually had a positive numbers, but foreign-born workers, the numbers have dropped off the charts. It has a lot to do with all the immigration scares, et cetera, obviously. But the real concern here is when we look at college grads, recent college grads, unemployment is now approaching double digits, over 9% for those that just graduate college in a field that they thought was probably viable. And we're talking about computer science, coding, et cetera. Those jobs aren't there. Coders literally coded themselves out of jobs, and now AI coders take over and just replicate the coding. So, I would just tell you for young people to say, what should my kids study? We get this question, frankly, a lot from our clients. Hey, my grandson's, junior in high school, and what field should he go into? Well, if they're not going into medical or legal, right, they have a desire to go those routes, traditional college is not necessarily going to be the wisest economic choice they can make. So the trades are, in micro, Dirty Jobs Micro is out there constantly pounding the table saying, listen, you need to understand where the job market's going to be over the next 10 to 15 years. And experienced and licensed and competent tradesmen and in various forms, from journeyman electricians to plumbers, pipe fitters, welders. AI cannot perform those jobs, and robots are not going to be doing those jobs. Someday they might, but if you were, a 20-year-old and wanted to have a way to make sure you could provide for your family, you need to make sure you understand where the economy is going and get into the job fields that are going to pay you handsomely, and they will reward you. I mean, I don't know if you've had to have a service person to your house lately, Chip, but to get a plumber or an electrician to show up, it's quite a challenge. In fact, we are looking, and any good contractors listening right now, my wife has quite a few projects that we're looking for a good GC.
All of these negative economic indicators, our local Congressman Don Bacon is putting them on President Trump's tab. Omaha World Herald headline: Representative Don Bacon sounds alarm on economy. Storm clouds on the horizon because of tariffs.
Well, it's amazing when he says he's not going to run for your election. He's free to start talking in a little different tone, right? And I would just say, look, again, we've not seen inflation come from the tariffs yet, right? So we see people screaming and yelling, and the left right now is running out, oh, they're taxing the American people. What's interesting, Chip, though, but if they wanted to tax evil corporate America, is that not taxing the American public? I'm confused, right? So again, Don Bacon is positioning himself for his next move. We've talked about that. I don't think the president, even though he kind of floated that in an interview, is realistic at this point. But yeah, you never know. But anyway, I would just tell you the job market has been deteriorating for the last 3 years. This is not because of Trump getting into office. And yes, we have a weaker economy in certain markets. And I've told you, we've been in a recession. We've called it a rolling recession since first quarter of 2024.
Up next, David Brooks is great, but it takes a team to do what we do at Retire Smart. We welcome back to our show a vital member of that team, financial advisor Mike Schudel, joins us next on Retire Smart with David Brooks. Welcome back to Retire Smart with David Brooks. I'm Chip Maxwell. Outside of David Brooks, our guest this week is our most senior financial advisor, having recently marked his 5-year anniversary at Retire Smart. He's our resident authority on estate planning and exit planning for entrepreneurs. He's a certified financial planner with a law degree, among other academic credentials, and he joins us now. David, please welcome financial advisor Mike Schudel.
Hey, thank you, Chip. Yes, once again, joining me in the studio is our resident authority on all things when it comes to estate transfers, estate taxes, and business exits, etc. Mike Schudel, how we doing, brother?
Doing great. Thanks for having me back.
Absolutely. So, look, excited to have you in. We just hosted our second what we call business tax planning class. This is for entrepreneurs that are growing their business or someday planning to exit, or maybe not planning to exit, but need to have the tax planning done in case that exit is forced upon them. That we had really glowing reviews from that event. So, talking about that, we're seeing so many higher net worth clients that have come to the realization they're just not getting everything they think they're getting from their current advisory firms. And when it comes to tax planning in particular, we've kind of shined on that. In fact, you have now taken the reins and you're leading our private wealth division, which is really for people that have at least $5 million in liquid net worth or higher, because one, they have some unique challenges we have to provide for them. They have definite estate planning issues we have to provide for them, but they also don't realize all the things that are available for them. And look, I know everybody listening is not $5 million in net worth. There are some investment products that by law are precluded from you investing in unless you achieve this level. It's called a qualified investor. And so now you're leading that division to help people understand how to get true diversification in their investments. And I mean, we're talking about everything from the NFL now to private equity, private credit, all kinds of things. But anyway, talk a little about the experience of working with some of these higher net worth clients and business owners who've come to the realization they don't understand maybe the sort of risk they're taking.
Absolutely. So when you're dealing with these high net worth business owners, the complexities start to just layer on top of each other as they get closer and closer to wanting to wind that up and either transition the business internally to, key employees or maybe even family, or to sell it externally. So they are looking for an advisor that can tie everything together, the tax knowledge, the investment knowledge, the estate planning knowledge. It's just very difficult to source all of these specialties individually in one person that's good at just that area.
Well, even we can't do that, and that's the thing.
No.
There is no one man Superman that can be all things to a client
It's
when
impossible.
it comes to the complexities of today's financial planning.
But
and you don't have to be high net worth for that to be true.
No, but the turnkey for us that we found at Retire Smart is you do need a team. Absolutely. I've never met a high net worth person, and I'd say that that's anybody with, frankly, over $1 million that didn't have a team. An attorney that's helping them build their estate, their wills and trusts, a CPA that's giving them coaching on, some of them are just historians just doing their tax return year by year, but some of them are a little bit more proactive. But to have that one person that understands and is fluent in all of those
kind of
different
quarterbacks
languages,
all those
yes.
relationships, yeah.
I would offer that with the training that you insist that all of the advisors do here, not only Monday mornings for 4 hours a day, but also for 3 hours on Fridays. I've never seen another firm that does that kind of level of training.
Well, we do dedicate a lot of time to that, but that's just it too. And then we have someone take the lead, become that resident authority on various issues. We've asked you, you do have a law degree. You do not practice law. I'll cover that, but you are intricately trained to understand not only inheritance tax, like here in Nebraska, but estate taxes for multiple states, because there are states that still charge those things. My home state where I was born in Baltimore, Maryland, is the only state left that charges both an inheritance tax and an estate tax. And people are like, wait, what do you mean? What's the difference? Well, one's taxing the beneficiary, the other one's taxing the estate before the beneficiary gets anything. thing,
Right.
right? And then you have to deal with federal estate taxes, which are at least for the near future are not an issue for a lot of folks, but we know that's likely to change within 1 to 2 election cycles, right?
Right. So let me just offer this. Having somebody on your team, and it could be any one of the advisors, technically, it could be the attorney, it could be the CPA, it could be your financial advisor. But more likely than not, the financial advisor is going to have as much fluency in all those areas as possible. And something that I am delighted to do for my clients is get on the phone with their CPA, get on the phone with their attorney after that planning has been done so that there's synergy in the plan and there's no adversarial relationship going on. I want to collaborate with these people to deliver the best outcome for
it's
the
actually
client.
critically important that you collaborate. Otherwise, something the financial services professional, whoever you're working with, does could be counterintuitive or counteract something the tax professional is doing, or the estate planning professional, or the business attorney, et cetera. So, if you're an entrepreneur, you need a business attorney. If for your state, you need an estate planning or elder law attorney. You're going to need financial advisor to help you on the asset allocation and risk management, and then you're going to need a proactive tax team to help you not only file and prepare your taxes, but proactively plan your taxes. So the complexities that go into this are quite enormous. Now, one of the things we believe in here is research, right? And we always joke when you come on, you have more letters behind your name, literally, than there are in the alphabet. I think 9 different designations or whatever it is at this point. Can't even read them all off. But the reality is we like to go to research. We believe in institutional research. And so from Stanford University, we've talked about some of the research that they've provided for us. Pennsylvania, UPenn, right? An Ivy League school, Wharton School of Business and Finance there. I've been blessed to do a preceptorship there, et cetera. And that's how I build out the model for the risk assessments that we do for clients, is following what we call the Wharton model. Can you talk a little about how that applies, especially no matter what your net worth is?
Absolutely. So the Wharton model is something that, we want to have a standard that we can define how we approach things. And the Wharton School of Finance has done a tremendous amount of research. Specifically, what we're paying attention to is for the senior community. People, don't get me in trouble for putting some people in this camp, but basically people 50 and over.
Hey,
that's
what are
not
you
to
talking
say
about?
you're senior.
I
know I'm
senior.
going to step in it there, but nonetheless, if we could move beyond that.
Well,
the point
I guess I
trying
can
to
be
make,
proud that my hairs are gray. I still have my hair. So
hey, I'm
that's
knocking
cool,
on
right?
the door, and this is so I'm paying attention here. But something that we need to acknowledge is these people don't have the luxury of so much time to recover from a major market shift, and we are in one of the 3 most overvalued markets.
Yeah, traditionally
in
speaking,
market
absolutely.
history. Now, as I love that you've pointed out, that doesn't demand a market correction. But what will happen, no matter what, is earnings have to catch up with stock prices.
Right.
That either means that we pause for a little bit on growth and earnings catch up, or the growth goes the other way, and that's how we catch up.
Well, the reality is most of our clients, it's not an issue of them running out of money. Our clients are ending up with too much money or too much income. We talk about forced income all the time because they end up saving the predominant amount of their money in the wrong tax bucket, if you will, that deferred tax bucket, the 401k, the IRA, and they're forced these big distributions when they get into their late 70s and early 80s, $100,000 forced what we call RMDs, requirement distributions. They don't want the money, right? And it's all taxable, and it makes them pay more for Medicare services, B and D. So there's all kinds of penalties here, and they end up transferring way more wealth than they ever thought they would to the next generation. And without proper planning, those transfers can be absolutely disastrous. Now, we're not going to do any celebrity ones here, but we've talked often over the last couple of years between you and Colin, the estate planning attorney, coming on the show of some of these celebrities that have just completely messed up their planning. But what the Wharton model is saying is sequence of returns is what you have to understand. We've had an amazing bull run for about 15 years now. But if you happen to time your retirement during the next downturn, and of course we don't know, we're not saying when that is, and people don't realize how much a downturn can be because we haven't seen one in a while, right?
Not really since 08.
Yeah, so 08, 09, the markets went down over 50%, and a lot of people forget that. I started my career in the 90s, and very early on, within 2 years, we went through the worst bear market of anyone that's alive today. 3 consecutive years of negative double-digit returns. And if you're following, and I joked about last week, we covered on the show, the gentleman that invented the so-called 4% rule said, oh, now maybe it's the 4.7% rule. And I said, no, not so fast.
Wrong direction.
Because if you took 4.7% out and inflation adjusted and happened to retire January 1st, 2000, you're out of money. here in 25. You have nothing left in your portfolio. And so we want people to understand why we look at research, why we believe in these institutions, because they backtest this stuff for over 100 years. And that's what we're trying to help people understand is your assets, we want to provide income in retirement regardless of your net worth. But you have to have a plan that reaches out and does risk management, asset allocation, tax planning, and then legacy planning and passing the assets on, and include medical and healthcare, which we're not talking about in this segment. But so anyway, bottom line is you teach one of our most popular classes called Tax and Estate Planning, along with Colin Kastrick, who is an estate planning practicing attorney. When is that next opportunity?
Yeah, it's coming up a little ways from now, Tuesday, November 11th or Thursday, November 13th, here in our offices at 6:30 p.m. Now, you don't need to come to both classes. It's the same content each night, but that way we can have as many people attend as possible.
Excellent. So go to retiresmartnow.com, click on the events tab to attend an event. You do have to register. The classes do fill up. Mike, we are out of time for this week. Thanks so much for stopping in.
Thank you.
All right, Chip, what do we have next?
Up next, you have questions. David Brooks has answers. Q&A is next on Retire Smart with David Brooks. Welcome back to Retire Smart with David Brooks. I'm Chip Maxwell. Into the Q&A we go, David. The first question is about Medicare versus an employer plan. I turned 65 this year, and I am still working. I'll probably work until I'm 70. What is the rule about Medicare? I think I can utilize it even if I'm still working, but I really don't need it until I retire because I have health insurance through my job. Should I stay with my current plan or switch to Medicare?
So typically, you're going to be pushed onto Medicare by your employer,
at least
for what's called Part A, right? So the health insurance Part A, which is only for hospitalization, will kick in when you're 65. You already paid for it, okay? And so that will become your primary insurance, and then the health insurance you have through work would be the secondary to that for things that potentially they didn't cover when it comes to hospitalization, but all your outpatient stuff, your doctor's visits, screenings, tests, all that would still be covered by your health insurance from your employer if you keep it. But here's the thing, Chip, you may not want to keep it because most group health insurance has pretty high out-of-pocket expenditures today relative to Medicare. So, and you're paying most likely through payroll deduction for some portion of the premium. Most large employers pay about 75 to 80% of the freight for the employee. Smaller employers, it's more 50-50. So depending on what you're paying per paycheck out of pocket, we'd want to calculate, let's say you're paying $150 a paycheck, 2 paychecks a month, you're paying $300 a month to have the healthcare plan you have at work. Well, did you know that a 65-year-old in Nebraska, for less than $125 when they turn 65, could buy a supplemental policy called a Medigap or a Medicare supplemental policy, Plan G, the best plan you can buy, that will cover 100% of the out-of-pocket for Part A, except for a couple $100 deductible to start the year. So you would not have out-of-pocket exposure and you would not have co-pays. It would cover most of those things. Now, you would still need a Part D plan, which is a drug card, depending on what prescription drugs you take. But often when we run this analysis, something we do for you, you're better off walking away from the group plan at work and going on to full-blown Medicare. Now, it's not 100% the answer, but that's typically the case. And by the way, your employer will like this. They will incentivize you to do it because you're going to save the employer some cash. So sometimes you're going to go to the employer and say, hey, look, if I still want to work for another 5 years, but if I don't take your health care plan, right, could you give me a raise? Right? I'm just saying, it's such a realistic discussion. So great question, but it's very important you get competent advice before you make a decision. In other words, don't just Google this. Sit down with a professional. We've got a specialist here that we can set up a phone or Zoom call with you if you'd like, just to get those questions answered, or you can seek somebody out in the community, but make sure they're licensed and experienced with these matters.
This reminds me, we just had one of our ABCs of Medicare classes, and we'll have another one this fall during the open enrollment
period. We typically do it two or three times during the open enrollment period, September through like November. Please, I would highly recommend you go to that.
All right, next question, David. Helping adult children. My husband and I are both retired. We have 3 children, all in their 30s, and it seems we are always supporting at least one of them. I'm starting to worry that our nest egg is dwindling, but I don't want my kids to suffer. How can we help them while ensuring that our situation remains solid?
Sadly, I have a lot of experience in this area.
Well, I noticed you started reacting even as I read the question.
Now, my boys are in their 20s. I have 2 boys in their 20s.
My wife and I have a little experience in this area as well.
Who both still get some form of financial assistance from mom and dad. Now, I was a little rougher around the edges on this in the beginning of the outset. I'm like, because I kind of, left the house at 17 and kind of never looked back, right? And,
I see you as a tough love father. Yeah.
But I've realized, too, the economics of the folks in their 20s and 30s today are a little bit more challenging when you add in the average wage they earn to the average cost they have to spend for things like housing, insurance, auto insurance, or automobiles. Now, I don't have a lot of sympathy to go out and get a $900 car payment or something, right? But if they're just driving a reasonable vehicle and having to pay for that and finance it, if they've now got some form of debt load from their education experience, and of course the cost of these insurances have gone through the roof, and then housing. Right now, housing is almost 4 times more expensive relative to their wage as it was for someone that walked out of college in 1985. So they are at a disadvantage in our current economic environment. So once I kind of looked at it from that, I subsidize them. But I have a simple rule. You got to move the ball forward. If you want me to keep throwing the ball down the field, you got to keep running forward. I'm not gonna just placate you where you status quo. Well, so if they make positive moves, I'm willing to help them.
We must have clients who are in this same situation who are trying to help their
we
children.
do, and we
so
coach them.
What's the answer? What is it? Is it all part of having a written plan? So it's planned out and thought out ahead of time?
Well, so what we don't want to get back to the questioner is we don't want you to run out of money. No one's going to lend you money for retirement.
Right.
Your kids have ways to borrow money for education, for housing, for cars. If they're upstanding members of society and have reasonable credit scores. There's a lot of ways. Now, you don't want them to overburden themselves, so you should work with a competent financial planner. If you're not working with our team, work with whoever you're working with, and just make sure you're okay for the assistance that you're going to give it. The other thing you'd want to look at, Chip, is how are you giving that assistance? You'd want to do it in a tax-advantaged way, and you can. Like, I'm pretty good at that because, as I said, I do give my boys some assistance each year, but I'm also making sure they're fully funding their Roth IRAs and other things that will give them a better future well down the road 40, 50 years from now.
So make sure that adult children are exploiting every opportunity possible. That's one way for the parents to make sure they don't overextend
and do not take away from your retirement to help them, right?
Right.
Because, like I said, no one can come rescue you in retirement if you're not rescuing yourself.
Next question, David. Long-term care. I'm 58 and my husband is 60. We are currently shopping for long-term care insurance. It's expensive, so expensive that it's causing us to wonder if it's something we actually need or can afford. What do you think?
So I will tell you, traditional long-term care insurance is very, very expensive, and we'll quote that for a lot of clients if they want. That is the M in the SMART plan, the medical and healthcare expenditures we're going to cover. The problem is, the reality is most people, these premiums are not locked in, so they will go up, and they go up at almost twice the rate of inflation. They go up 5.9% a year on average the last 20 years, Chip. So you're doubling the premium you pay every 12 years. And most people, you're not going to use that long-term care. You're going to buy this when you're in your 50s. So when you might use it is in your mid-80s in reality. So it's about 25 years. So you would have had almost 3 doubles in that premium. So most people just get sick of it about year 15. I don't want to pay this anymore. Do I need it? And we see them walk in. They were sold insurance years ago. And we don't need it. And they stop paying. And the reality is once they would turn on the care needed, and I have 3 of 4 parents right now between Melissa and I alive that need care right now as we speak. So it's very high probability, 74% you're going to need some benefits. And what I would tell people is like playing poker. If you ever played No Limit Hold'em, you're kind of pot committed once you buy one. Now, the great news is those are the old policies. I don't like ever to kind of talk or pitch product on the air, but there are new innovative solutions available now that are these hybrid policies that are very flexible. You can make a deposit, Chip. Let's just say you reposition, maybe you had $100,000 sitting in a CD that's not invest money. It's not money you need every day. It's just kind of that off to the side safe money. You could reposition a portion of that, $50,000 or something, into some new hybrid policies, and there's multiple versions of this. And here's the best benefit. You get a death benefit if you never touch it or use it. So it pays out tax-free like life insurance to your beneficiaries, so you get a guaranteed rate of return on it. You can earn interest in some of these policies and then take them back later, so it was like a savings account. Or you can multiply the number you deposit, up to 3 to 5 to 1, depending on your age, etc. So in other words, a $50,000 deposit might buy up to $250,000 of long-term care coverage if that's what you should need. So you should talk with a competent professional. We have some really innovative products in the marketplace today to help cover a need just like this.
One more question, David. This one is about conflicting priorities. The question is, did you see the NBC poll of Gen Z voters showing men who voted for Trump prioritizing marriage and family and women who voted for Harris putting it at the bottom of the barrel?
This was actually quite surprising. They asked a lot of questions in there and they ranked them. I did actually see this poll, and this was from NBC News of all places. Yeah. And of course, as they subsectioned out a bunch of things, but what was, all over the internet, social media was they segregated men and women who they voted for and how they answered. So men that voted for Trump, their number one priority, they want to have kids, right? They want to get married and settle down. Yeah, that was their number one priority. The last priority for women that voted for Kamala was children. It was the bottom 6% thought it was a priority. And there's a lot of different things in there, but it just goes to the way society is positioning things for people. And of course, social media is not doing anything to help this because these algorithms, no matter what you're on, just keep feeding you more of the same. And we saw this recently at a Philadelphia Phillies baseball game. This lady went over and took a ball from the young man, and I have no idea her political background or anything, but they call her the Philly Karen. And it just, they went full blow, and that's the world today. It just goes all in on these crazy things, and that's a sad state of affairs, frankly. But yeah, that was really eye-opening to me. I mean, why? Listen, if we don't procreate, if we don't have children, society, we disappear. It's pretty simple.
Yeah. There was a corporate CEO at another baseball game. I think it took it was either a baseball or a souvenir cap or something out of a kid's
social media
hand.
catches these people up.
Yes.
So listen, if you don't know and you happen to go to a ball game and catch the ball, look around for the child nearest and hand it off. It's pretty much an obligation at this point.
Up next, from incompetence to malfeasance, there have been some dramatic examples of financial mismanagement by state governments. We'll tell you about it next on Retire Smart with David Brooks. Welcome back to Retire Smart with David Brooks. I'm Chip Maxwell. David, I do want to get to those stories about the state governments, but I want to make sure we don't run out of time to mention this. You were talking about good leadership at the start of the show. And there's a former black shirt now who is the CEO of Teammates, the Teammates mentoring program, Des Moines Adams. People are hearing his voice now during the promotional breaks in the show because we really want to push a couple of recruiting events, recruiting mentors for Teammates coming up in October.
Well, I actually ran into Des Moines right after the game Saturday, and he was on the big screen at the game doing a pitch for Teammates. And so if you're watching on YouTube, so we've got 2 opportunities for you to learn about Teammates and if it would be worthwhile for you investigating being a mentor. And I got to tell you, folks, it's fantastic. Less than an hour commitment a week at a public school. You go to the school. They make it very simple to do. But if you want to find out about it, come October 1st right here to our office. We're going to actually have, I believe, lunch provided.
We're providing lunch. Get you in and out in an hour.
From 12 to 1, in and out in an hour. You'll learn about Teammates, what it would take to step up and be a volunteer. Or if you're down in Lincoln, we're doing it Runza's national headquarters October 14th. And the same thing, 12 to 1, and lunch will be provided. Now, I'm not sure what we're providing for lunch here, but I'm going to go out on a whim and guess what you're going to get if you go to the Lincoln version of that, what you'll get for. And my nephew actually got his first Runza at the game, by the way, Saturday. Thought it was pretty good. But yeah, we talked about leadership earlier in the show with Matt Rule, right? Yes. And Des Moines Adams does a fantastic job of carrying on the character and leadership that Tom Osborne set up in 1991 when they were founded. Yep. So
more than 30 years.
Great organization. We're happy to write the checks that we do to them and support them on air, etc. They're just fantastic folks to work with.
Going strong, but they really need mentors.
Over 1,000 kids right now in Omaha and Lincoln are waiting for mentors. So if you can give up an hour a week.
There's no obligation if you come and join us, but at least you can come and learn about it and get something to eat as well. All right, back into the news we go, David. Here is the headline. This is from the North Carolina State Treasurer's website. So it's a little self-promotional, but facts are facts. State Treasurer Brad Briner uncovers $170 million in unspent taxpayer dollars. And your subject line on the email you sent me was, "Never trust the government." I mean, was this a hidden slush fund, or was it just incompetence?
It's complete incompetence. And I need you to understand that I live in a county here. I live in Sarpy County, and one of our clients used to work for the county and was responsible for helping the Treasury Department move money around. The same shenanigans go on in your county governments. You need to pay attention. And this is one of the things I love to tell retirees that have time and care about these things. You should show up to school board meetings, to county commissioner meetings, city council meetings, and of course, state legislature meetings, and testify and ask questions on the budget. It's all public information, but you have to request it. They don't make it as easily available simply by posting on a simple website. And dollars like this, so $170 million just sitting there for a couple of years, Chip, right? We've had interest rates up. So if you just got 4% on those dollars for the last 4 years, that's $35 million in compounded interest that the state could use. And I'm sure there's school kids in North Carolina, there's homeless veterans, there's et cetera. How many different folks could have benefited if the state had been
without
a better
some service? They were either leave it in the taxpayer's pocket, and as you say, let him use it, or spend it on whom and for
so they
what it's supposed to be
the
spent.
citizens of North Carolina by that amount, and that money could have compounded in society and generated much more in tax revenue for the state. Again, we want the government to be good stewards of the capital they receive via taxation theft that they do.
Well, speaking of theft, from incompetence to malfeasance, here we go to Michigan. Townhall.com headline: former Michigan employee pleads guilty to bribery, identity theft, over $2.8 million. This is a government official stealing from the very people she was supposed to be serving.
Yeah, once again, and that's why I say you really can't trust the government. You need to question. Look, we need these government entities. We need to understand. I'm not calling for anarchy or no governments, but we need to hold these folks accountable. And it's become this, for the last 20 years, it's become untenable to challenge governments, to question what they're doing, especially during COVID, right? We got, that's nonsense. And reality is that's what we need the citizenry to do, is to question everything. And from medical advice they're giving you to financial shenanigans we're seeing going on, it's getting ridiculous. Instead, I sent you another story. Sadly, we've got one more of these to cover, right? $1 billion potentially of fraud going on up in Minnesota.
Minnesota, Front Page Magazine, $1 billion Somali autism fraud in Minnesota. Autism claims rose from 3 million to 400 million.
In 3 years, from 4 million to 400 million.
There's a Somali mafia at work up there. This didn't just happen with autism. Apparently, also feeding our future. There was a food pantry, a food program that was racked with fraud. And so
here's how and why this happens. The government should not be in the charitable business, period. Just like I don't think they should be in the private sector business. I don't like the intel nonsense we talked about with Trump, et cetera, here in recent weeks. But the government grants large dollar amounts because we put these big fat pork stuffed bills through Congress, and they have all these earmarks, and we're going to send $200 million to this charitable organization, this and that, and then unscrupulous people go in and create these NGOs that are not really doing the cause they say, non-government organizations, and they pull these funds, and it's for fraud, and it's been proven here time and time again. Yet we see nobody go to jail, we see nobody get really punished for this, and this is so much waste, it's ridiculous. But anyway, it just gets my blood boiling thinking about it.
Well, it was 400 million last year, and it's a total of 1.4 billion, and then another 250 million on that food program. I tell you, the fall of the Twin Cities. My wife went to college up there, St. Thomas College, now St. Thomas University. You run across Tommies down here in Omaha a lot. There are quite a few. And I have relatives and friends who live in the Twin Cities, and they loved living. My wife loved going to school there and living there.
I used to love visiting Minneapolis, frankly.
I've been up there
city,
several times to visit, but I'll tell you, in the last 5 or 10 years, with the political leadership or lack thereof, my goodness.
Different world.
Hey, David, we've got a few minutes here to play with, and I want to get to this chart that you sent to the team. The world's investors are sending a signal. Now, those watching on YouTube can see we've got a series of charts from the USA, UK, Canada, Japan, Germany, Switzerland, Australia, and New Zealand. And we're looking at investment rates and debt. And what is it that you're seeing, David?
Well, we're seeing the long end of the yield curve. In other words, longer maturities, longer dated maturities, like 25, 30-year bonds that are being issued from these governments. the yields have been skyrocketing on the long end of the curve. So what that's an indication of is that the world that buys these, which is typically big pension funds and institutional investors, is saying, no mas, we don't believe you can pay your bills. So if we're going to buy that debt, we're taking on risk, we think, because we don't know if you're going to fiscally manage your country's balance sheet correctly. So we're going to demand a higher yield. And so the bid to cover ratio at auctions is happening right here in our treasuries has gotten really weak. Normally, when we auction off U.S. treasuries, we get a bid to cover of about 3.5 to 1. So, which there's $3.50 bidding for every dollar that we auction off. Those auctions have been down to only 2 to 1 right now, and that is scary when one of those $2 is the Federal Reserve, right? So our government just kind of buying their own debt to make sure that we don't have just 1-to-1 coverage. That is telling you the world is saying, I don't think that you guys are managing the debt, which they're not. Obviously, we have $37 trillion right here in the U.S. All these other countries are overspending as well. And the debt market, which is way bigger than the stock and equity market, is telling you, no mas, there's going to be a day of reckoning. And when that happens, it's not going to be pretty for the equity markets either.
That'll do it for this week, folks. Please visit our website, retiresmartnow.com, and click Attend an Event at the top of the page to see everything we currently offer. No charge, no obligation for our events, but you do need to register. You can do it online or by calling 402-369-7777. David, bring us home.
Have a blessed and prosperous week. We'll talk to you next time.
Thank you for listening to Retire Smart with David Brooks. I'm Chip Maxwell. For David Brooks and the entire team at Retire Smart, have a great week. Neither Tom Osborne, Des Moines Adams, nor teammates are clients of Retire Smart and were compensated for this sponsorship endorsement as such term is defined under SEC Rule 206, subsection 4-1. For further information about this sponsorship and the compensation details, visit retiresmartnow.com and click on the Sponsorships tab. The University of Nebraska and University of Nebraska Athletics, also known as Nebraska Cornhuskers, are not clients of Retire Smart Wealth LLC or Retire Smart LLC. Playfly Sports Properties, on behalf of the Nebraska Cornhuskers, was compensated for this endorsement as such term is defined under SEC Rule 206, subsection 4-1. For further information about this sponsorship and the compensation details, visit retiresmartnow.com and click on the Sponsorships tab. Financial advisor Mike Schudel has a Juris Doctorate law degree but is not licensed to practice law. Any statements and opinions are general information and not legal advice.